I've said it before, I'll say it again. There are no, I said it in a clear text comment, which Inmendham obviously didn't comprehend. His answer was to my saying there is no conception of forces in his physics. His answer was, but I say, haven't you listened? I say forces all the time. That's right. That's how dumb you are. You say, you use the word forces when interchangeably, and I demonstrate this in live video, that you use the word force interchangeable with your quanta, and you later on you deny that you do this. You think this is petty. Well, if telling you where you're wrong, fundamentally wrong, is petty, well, I don't know what to do for you.
Yeah, again. Well, half of the day. Yeah, again. Well, it's the only conversation in town, so.
Well, it's rather rude to always begin this conversation the way you do. Not terribly butthurt over it, but it just shows that you don't know when you're speaking to your better. I am orders of magnitude better educated than yourself, and you should listen. You're offering £5,000 dollars, to speak to a professor. I'm actually saving you that money if you would listen. There's no notion of forces because your entire physics is only made up of kinetic interaction of arrows, with the slight caveat that there's polarization change, a change of color in the arrows. That being said, all interactions are exactly the same, so you can phrase those reactions as you have done, as red in, red out, red in, out, blue perpendicular, so on, and red perpendicular, so on and so forth. Or you could say that that in that interaction there's a force, but it's really devoid of content, because every interaction being the same, the notion of force in that system loses its meaning that it has in the everyday sense. It's as descriptive and as correct just to do as you started off saying, that it's red in, red out, or red in, blue perpendicular, blue out, and whatever you say, because in classical physics, in the common notion of a force is something that acts on a body, but you clearly state that your quanta forces don't act on the body. They act on one element and cause one element to leave. Now, apart from what I've told you about the statistical nature of containing, under this purely kinetic system, containing a structure in a random sea of balls with a boundary, is a statistical unlikelihood, very unlikely. They will happen, they'll happen of varying densities, but they will just as quickly disintegrate. This is just statistical mechanics that I can't prove to you, but it's intuitively obvious. So I thought I'd just cover some egregious sections of your video. I mean, you have no notion of force, ergo you have no notion of pressure in your system, which I'll deal with in the clip.
Well, I guess we have to deal with it, but it's yeah, I have my same objections. It's just these arrogant declarations, appeals to authority. We have a ton and ton. The evidence is just so overwhelming.
Well, I actually don't appeal to the evidence in the criticisms. They're criticisms based on your statements and readily extendable implications of the statements of your theory.
You just can't possibly come up with anything to overwhelm these volumes and volumes of verifications, and just
Now, that's not the tone and sentiment of my videos. You may well find them arrogant and pompous and so on and so forth. That's because you just don't like what you're hearing, yeah? And perhaps don't even understand it.
Just written in stone. So now he's obliging me to deal with Einstein-Lorentz as...
Right, now, yeah, you are obliged. That's our best theory, and the metric by which we judge it as the best theory is that it makes these predictions, and there's been experiments to verify those predictions.
The definition of the...
If your theory makes different predictions than the reality, conventional philosophy of science says your philosophy is wrong.
The math that's associated, and very indirectly associated, I would argue. I mean, highly strangled mathematics.
What is strangled mathematics apart from mathematics you don't understand? It's actually a simple formula that comes out of some very basic assumptions and Pythagoras theorem. This is 13, 14-year-old mathematics, high school mathematics.
And it's the same math that leads to the paradoxical circumstances where you could...
There are no paradoxes, i.e., as he suggests,
see somebody die before you see somebody born.
No, there are no such paradoxes in special and general relativity. Causality is preserved.
Again, I'm arguing.
Show me a link. You're not arguing. You're just rambling. You're just rambling disagreement without presenting anything to give substance to those disagreements.
Is evidence of a failure, not a success, in your math.
It's certainly unintuitive.
Your understanding of function. I don't know whether there's too much here to deal with. This guy did post a mock-up of some of the implications of my argument regarding velocity and how it affects whatever might be considered some sort of time dilation. But Lorentz goes further than that anyway. It really is it's math regarding observation, and the observation is through the idea that light travels extra distance, but not in any real world. It always goes the shortest distance.
This is just nonsense what he's talking about. the Lorentz contraction is clear. The measured time from the point of the observer at the location, i.e. his clock, runs slower when he goes fast.
Shortest distance somehow is the longer path.
Now, I've tried for the longest while to talk to Inmendham to point out that general relativity, which embodies also includes the notion of accelerated frames of reference, has to do with this. But this is special relativity we're talking about, that the Lorentz contraction talks about.
Yeah, kind of crap. So anyway, yeah, I'll play this little bit here, I guess, but I don't. He assumes that, and it's just an assumption, and he tells me what my theory predicts, right?
This is funny.
I haven't even written up a prediction on the ratio of time dilation versus velocity.
Right, so what we're talking about here is a function where the input is your velocity and the output is time dilation. No, the other way around. No, that's right. It's the output is the time dilation, so it's the to do with the minus of the v squared and c squared business that gives the Lorentz contraction the particular form at high velocities. What we're saying is it's the time Lorentz contraction is a function of velocity, so and constant velocity. If you have a thing traveling at a particular velocity, if you know its velocity, you put it into the function machine and it pops out the answer. This is your time dilation as observed from an external observer.
But I guess I would argue that it's probably going to be parallel to anything Einstein comes up with relative to the increase in velocity as a ratio of acceleration.
Right, so what are you talking about acceleration for? The function is simple. Input your velocity, get output time dilation. Why are you talking about acceleration?
So I think that's what.
That's another problem. You see about not understanding forces and the nature of them acting on a body is forces act on bodies and produce acceleration. Ergo, acceleration is, by F equals ma, is a symptom of a force.
Lorentz creates a funny curve is that obviously the percentage of your velocity that's going to be due to your acceleration.
No, you're at a velocity, constant velocity. Under Newton's laws, you carry on that velocity. And I know you sometimes, want to reject this, but here you're failing to work under these assumptions. There's nothing to do with acceleration here. It's a function of velocity, the time dilation. Nothing to do with the acceleration. This is a true statement after you've accelerated, if there's been a change in velocity. This is a statement about things at constant velocity, about things not accelerating or not accelerating anymore.
In a gravitational field, it's going to be a higher percentage.
It's nothing to do with gravitational fields.
In the beginning than it is at the end. At the end, you have a very high velocity, and the added acceleration is very small.
See, so this basic movement of the terms of reference about what's being spoken about, it belies Inmendham's ignorance. Acceleration is to be under the criticism of the Lorentz contraction. Acceleration has nothing to do with the conversation.
So it's like a meteor coming into Earth. It could be moving very, very fast, and the contribution of the Earth's gravity will be very minor to its overall velocity. And so it creates a curve where it means a lot in the beginning, and it starts to mean nothing. And
this is irrelevant nonsense.
When it starts to go a straight line. So anyway, I don't see any reason why eventually it could be that the same scenario happens in what I'm describing.
Well, first of all, if you want to think, you can't even think about what I'm saying. It's, given the trivial nature of your theory, working out the consequences is rather easy. And that's what I've done for you, and I'm telling you. And if you could turn your mind to it correctly, rather than invoking comets coming in and gravity and all this obfuscation, you'd see that your theory can never match the Lorentz contraction as predicted in special relativity. Alright, that's enough of that video. This is the video where he talks about a increase in pressure because of the build-up of light. Now, light in classical physics and in quantum physics exerts a pressure. That's because in quantum mechanics and in classical mechanics we have a consistent notion of a body that a force can act on. In Inmendham's scheme, all forces are transparent, with the exception of change of colour. One interaction results in no trajectory changes.
Alright, so here's different ways to explain it. Let's say I had two mirrors, and let's say they were perfect. So that meant any light between them just kept going back and forth, and it never deflected out. So you can sort of understand if I move.
You can sort of understand.
Move the two mirrors together, the light's going to go back and forth a lot more often.
Yeah, that's dead right.
It's going to hit the two surfaces of the mirrors a lot more often.
Yeah, it's going to hit.
And it's light, so it always hits with exactly the same force. And it's just going to keep reflecting, but you can sort of understand that there would be more.
Well, it only hits with a force in classical and quantum mechanics.
More pressure as you move the mirrors closer and closer together.
Well, force, pressure is force divided by the area, right? Since you have no notion of force, you have no notion of pressure. So what you're describing is correct classically, but it isn't part of your theory.
Together. Now, what if I create two kinds of colored light in between the two mirrors? One color, the blue, let's say, bounces off both surfaces. The other color goes through the surface.
Yeah. Remember, for every colour that doesn't actually go through the surface in Inmendham's theory, it's bounced directly back off one, and the other is bounced directly back off and heading away as a almost no trajectory change, yeah, as actually a change of colour.
And exits the side of the mirror, so it's like a relief valve. So,
but it's it's not a really, it might be a good analogy in classical physics, but it's not a relief valve or anything like a relief valve in your system, because in your system you don't have the notion of force, you don't have the notion of pressure acting on bodies.
If I put a blue thing that reflects blue, and I put a red thing that reflects red, you can sort of understand that.
You can sort of understand. Draw this out frame by frame, and you'll see, and this is the reason why he doesn't draw it out, because it's bloody obvious that there is more red rather than white light bouncing in between. You confine a coloured light in his system, but what doesn't happen in his system is any force.
All the blue stuff going this way will reflect off the blue, bounce into the red, and be deflected out the sides of the red mirror. And the blue mirror, the same thing will happen to the red energy. It's like a relief valve.
No, it's not.
And so all of a sudden, when I'm pushing the two together, there's nothing there. Nothing. No pressure. Because
there wasn't any pressure in the first place in your theory.
The other trick is none of the red from the outside world can get through the red mirror as it all reflects. And then the blue from this side can get through as it all reflects off the blue. So there's nothing in between.
There is. You know yourself that your head-on collisions result in direct reflections. There's as much stuff bouncing about in between, according to your theory, as it's just that it's devoid of a particular colour.
Get it? Where if there's two blue mirrors, all the blue gets trapped in between them. See, if there was red there, all the red gets out, but you're stuck with all the blue, and you can't get rid of it. And the same with two red things. Two red things can't get rid of the red. You get it?
Right. So we're done here. I'm done with Inmendham physics. He ought to be appreciative of my time. It's part of the sadness here. I've done my bit for him. I've got other things to be doing. This, you get it? Because he can, in this purely kinetic world, create a filter of colours, which indeed he can. It has no kinetic resultant force or acceleration due to it. That's just from your theory. You cry about questions about the constitution and creation of these boundaries of matter, as though you haven't spent a year trying to put the finer points on your so-called swirl of fish theory, vortex of fish, or whatever you call it. Yeah, you cannot contain them in your purely kinetic theory. Classical physics, quantum physics does, classical physics to some extent, quantum physics does, and makes predictions that fit the experiments, which you can just so easily deny. Well, that's a rather privileged position that I don't want to debate when your go-to get-out clause is, well, that never happened. You don't even understand the interferometer experiment. You don't even understand EMF. EMF is electromotive force. You've not demonstrated any forces. You've not demonstrated that the leaving perpendicular redness or blueness en masse will result in charge movement, electron movement in a conductor. That's what the electromotive force is. It's a pressure on electrons within the conductor. So you try to mock my lack of understanding of electricity. I have had a career of 25 years in electrical engineering. I've been to university and studied electrical engineering. I've been for 5 years to college studying electrical engineering. I know, you know, you've done nothing with your life except have itty bitty bits of experience working in a machine shop as the lackey, no doubt. Yeah, and of course the lackey, cheap labour, of course thinks he ran the show and he was the brains and of the operation. Yeah, we believe that.